Yep, absolutely. So in terms of digging into these win totals, um, the one that really caught my eye, Mark, is Penn State at 9.5, 9.5. I mean, Penn State has to play, the big boys, and Penn State has to go to USC. And, based on the offense that we saw last season, and, they lost one of their high profile receivers in the transfer portal. But that's expressing a lot of, and also, Manny Diaz went to Duke, so new defensive coordinator as well. That's a lot of confidence to place in a team that has some significant, is dealing with some significant transitions, does not have a patty cake level schedule. I was really struck that 9.5 is the number for Penn State. I probably would have set that one lower at 8.5. I think that would be a much more balanced, uh, uh, preseason number for the Nittany Lions.
Penn State's going to be a significant favorite in week one. However, West Virginia is not going to be necessarily a cake win and a guaranteed victory for Penn State on the road. Difficult place to play against a 9-4 team from last year. So, not calling the upset. I'm just saying, don't be shocked if something turns against Penn State there in week one. That's a possibility. I think that would be a 25 to 30% possibility of happening. So it's not out of the realm that Penn State could get upset there. I'm looking at the data at USC at the Coliseum as a difficult assignment, and then playing Wisconsin on the road and Ohio State back-to-back. And then, as you mentioned, Washington's probably the biggest wild card in the conference. Yes. And then on down the road, they do have a pretty light stretch to close out with Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. I actually like the 9.5. I think that's pretty reasonable myself.
It could be, but it also presupposes that if Penn State loses to Ohio State and USC, it has to run the table in its other 10 games to go over the number. So like that's where I come from with the Penn State number, that the margins actually are pretty small. I mean, I think Ohio State is a very, very likely loss on the schedule. And I would say right now, maybe you could call USC a 50-50 game. I'd kind of lean a little bit toward USC, if only because one and a half months into the season, mid-October, that USC's defense, if there are any weaknesses that need to be ironed out, by that point in time, the Trojans should have their footing on defense. And it's also probably going to be the best attended non-Notre Dame home game for USC this season. So I'd kind of lean toward USC there. And maybe that colors my thinking, that if they're going to lose to USC, and I definitely think they're going to lose to Ohio State, it goes back to, well, they have to be 10-0 in the other 10 games to go over the number. So that's really where I come from on Penn State.
They generally play Ohio State pretty close, but the record is atrocious. They are 1-11 the last 12 years playing Ohio State, and they've had some really good teams. They've had a Fiesta Bowl team, a Rose Bowl team, a Cotton Bowl team, another Rose Bowl team during that time frame, but 1-11, and I think it stretches out to 3-18 the last 21 against Ohio State. So that is not been a good matchup, and is not a good matchup for most in the Big Ten, but still that's considering how good Penn State generally is, that's a bit of an outlier to a certain extent.
Yeah. Uncle Rico thinks that, I didn't watch them outside of Ohio State and Michigan. Well, I did watch Drew Aller struggle for much of the 2023 season. And maybe this is a year in which he makes a significant leap, but Penn State played some pretty ugly ball in games other than Michigan and Ohio State. Like it was not pretty. It's not as though they were a juggernaut in 10 games and then, they came up against Ohio State and Michigan. Like they struggled against Indiana last year. So like no, so Rico, I did watch Penn State other than Ohio State and Michigan, and I don't think the Nittany Lions were terribly convincing on the main in 2023.